Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm Rhonda and this is a little bit of everything homestead. If you watched my last video, you know that Scott and I went and we got a bunch of seeds because we are going to be seed starting soon. Well, that got me thinking of what I want my garden to look like. So I got a piece of paper and some colored pencils and I started drawing, nothing fancy. I started drawing what I want my garden to look like. Then that got me thinking, what are my must-haves for a garden? If you're starting a garden from scratch, what are your must-haves? So I compiled a list of 5 things, super easy things. I could have did like 20, but that would have been a super long video. So I cut it down to the top 5, my top 5. Yours might be different. Let me know in comments if they are. My number 1 is location. We moved in March of 2024, so we were able to watch the patterns of the sun, watch where the rain gathered in our yard, how the wind blew, and like if it came out of the north or if it came out of the west. So we were able to gauge all of that stuff last summer so that we could pick the location that we thought would meet all the needs that a garden needs: sun, water, wind, all of those things. So we picked a location where we think all of those needs for a garden will be met. My number 2 is fencing. Where we live, we are surrounded by swamplands and we are surrounded by woods, and it is a high traffic area for deer. Our yard is kind of a thoroughfare, and we have an already established apple orchard, and we have a water source. We have 4 ponds on the property. So the deer like to come through, and as they come through, they like to munch. They munch on the apples, they go to the pond and they get drinks. So if I'm going to plant a garden and I'm going to plant food that I want to grow to feed my family, I don't want to feed the deer. So fencing is going to be a really important factor for us. Number 3 is beds. Are we going to have in-ground beds? Are we going to have raised beds? What are the size of the beds going to be? I think that we are going to start with the area that we picked. I think we're going to start with an area about 40 by 50 to just kind of get some in-ground beds. And then I also want to do some raised beds. When we were at the other property, we didn't have any raised beds. We did all in-ground, which is great. I love it. I love in-ground, but I also want some raised beds, to add a little bit of pretty into the garden so it visually gives you something to look at. And then I can also plant like an herb garden in a raised bed. I can plant some pretty flowers. I can do like a little tea garden or some roses. So I want to incorporate in-ground and raised in this garden. My number 4 is material. What kind of material are you going to use as a ground cover in your garden? When we were at the last homestead, Scott did long strips of in-ground beds, and then he did a long strip of grass, and then he did a long strip of in-ground bed, and then a long strip of grass, which was beautiful. I loved the way it looked. I loved that I could walk in it with my bare feet. It was great. The only thing is, it was kind of high maintenance because A, we had to mow it, and B, as the grass grew up, it also grew out. So it would grow into the garden beds a lot. So we were constantly having to make that, take like an edger and edge it to keep the grass where the grass is supposed to be, and then keep the dirt into the garden bed clean and free of grass. So what kind of material? You could use straw, you could use pea gravel, you could use wood chips, you could use mulch. I think for us, we will probably start with like a mulch straw wood chip kind of material because we bought a wood chipper. We have trees that we're cutting down, so we have access to wood chips. So I think that's what we're probably going to start out with. We will probably start out with the wood chips and see how it works with the garden beds. Like, you know how if the wood chips go into the garden bed, that's going to suck. Like, that's going to be high maintenance. So we'll have to figure out some kind of edging, some kind of barrier, maybe some rocks or something to keep the mulch in its spot and keep the dirt in its spot. So we'll probably do something like that, I would think. And we have a ton of rocks. If you guys saw my video on cleaning out the DZ, you know that rocks are everywhere on this property. So that brings me to number 5, water. What is your water source going to be? Are you going to run a hose from the house? Are you going to save your rainwater in IBC totes? We have 4 ponds accessible to us on this property where I thought it would be kind of neat if we got like one of those submersible pumps and we could pump the pond water from the pond into the garden. Like, you have fish, frogs, snakes, birds, bugs, turtles, like all of that stuff, like fertilizing your pond water, and then you take your pond water and you use it in your garden. It kind of makes sense. I don't know, is that gross? Should we not use the pond water? Last year, Scott got me 4 or 5 tomato plants, and I used the pond water to water the plants. And you guys, my tomatoes grew so nice. Like, and I chalk it up to that pond water. So I don't know. We don't have to use the pond water. We can also save rain and use the rain. We can pipe it from the house with a hose. Like, it's not a big deal. But I thought, you know, if the pond water's there, why not use it, right? So that is my top 5. Location, fencing, beds, in-ground or raised, the material that you're going to put on the ground to make your area pretty, and what your water source is. You guys, dreaming about building a new garden and planting all the food that you get to grow and having nature come, like the bugs and the snakes and the birds and the butterflies. Like, isn't that what winter is for? When you have your downtime, it's about like dreaming and expanding or building or making better what worked and what didn't work. Like, all of those things is like the whole garden experience, right? So thank you for hanging out with me today and going over my top 5. If you guys have different ideas or different needs in your area for your garden, throw them down in comments and let's have a conversation about what your top 5 are in your area, and let's grow together. I hope you enjoyed my video. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye, friends.